Welcome to Trade and Tariff Tuesdays. We're back with another edition of Avalara's webinar series discussing the current administration's tariffs and their impact on trade compliance. We started this weekly series back in February, so if it's your first time joining us, welcome. If you've been with us the whole time or you join us every now and then, welcome back. Just a friendly reminder that Avalara cannot provide legal or tax advice. On your screen is our safe harbor policy. Please take a moment to review. While you're doing that, I have a couple of housekeeping items for today. We're recording today's event and you'll receive the recording later on in the day. And the console you're looking at can be customized, so feel free to move or resize the windows. The additional resources section contains a lot of great related resources, including the slide deck. And there are several ways to engage with presenters and attendees today. First, if you have any questions, please submit them using the Ask a Question box. We'll save time for the Q&A at the end, and then also sprinkle them in. Typically, we sprinkle them in throughout the presentation. You can also submit your troubleshooting questions there in the Q&A box. Second, you can join our attendee chat. Just click the icon at the bottom of your screen with the two chat bubbles. You can introduce yourself, network, and discuss today's topic. Third, you can react to the presentation by clicking on the emoji icon. And last, since this session is less than an hour and intended to be interactive and responsive, it is not eligible for CPE credit. Just a quick note here that Avalara's Customer Conference Crush is on tour with two locations coming up in September, and they include Atlanta and Dallas. So check them out at events.avalara.com for details. All right, as you may know, we are moving to a bi-weekly format beginning in September. So here's a rundown of the dates. If we have any dates that change, we'll be certain to update you weekly or bi-weekly. And then you should be able to start registering for some of these shortly in our typical webinar page. All right. Let's take a moment and meet our presenters. We have Craig Reed, General Manager of Cross Border, and we have Patrick Fritz, Senior Director of Growth Cross Border today. I'm going to hand it over to Craig to get us started.
Thanks, Regina, and welcome back, Patrick. Another interesting week to talk about. So we are going to go into the latest news and what's been going on, some of the implications to your business, and finally how you can take action. And just a reminder, please do ask questions as we go through. We try to weave them in to whatever we're talking about. So if we see a question that you've asked that's kind of related to what we're talking about or what we're going to talk about, we'll try to do that, and then we'll try to leave room for questions at the end. We usually run out of time, so apologize for that, but we will follow up later with answers to your questions, so feel free to ask. So let's get started. Let's do a poll question, as we usually do, to get us started here. So Canada just recently announced that they're going to lift their 25% tariffs on half of the U.S. goods, or about $30 billion worth of goods of non-USMCA goods and USMCA goods. What date is that going to happen? We'll give you a second to answer that question. There's been a lot of news about that. I'm up here in Toronto, so obviously the Canadian news is very much packed with all news around the reciprocal tariffs and what's happening with the trade negotiations between Canada and the U.S. So we'll see what happens there. Let's click next. All right, about half of you got it right. Yeah, it's September 1st. So that's when Canada is going to lift reciprocal tariffs. And I think, we'll get into this in a second, but that was well received by the administration, and I think it's going to help us move forward in trade talks. So let's get into what's happened. August at a glance. August, maybe last week, August at a glance. We should maybe update this. Recent events. So as we talked about, Canada is going to lift the tariffs, about 25% tariff right now on about half U.S. goods. It had targeted, that was about, I think it's around 90 billion, so probably 50 billion around or thereabouts. are going to be have the tariffs removed. That doesn't include steel, aluminum, and autos, though that is continuing, which is sort of mirroring what the current U.S. administration is doing. And I know from the news up here, there's a lot of discussion. I believe Dominic LeBlanc, who is one of the trade ministers here in Canada, is going to be meeting with Lutnick. Trade discussions ongoing. Obviously, USMCA is a big part of that. So right now, Canada, because of USMCA, the effective tariff rate for Canada is about 6.5%. So most people believe it's the 35%, but it's actually effectively quite a bit lower, because close to 90%, or there's different numbers floating around, are qualifying for USMCA, and that means that they come in duty-free. So that reduces the effective rate for Canada to about 6%. And for Mexican imports, it's around 5.2%. So Canada and Mexico are really in a good position with USMCA. If it continues, it's set to be reviewed next year, next July, I believe. So we'll see if anything happens in advance of that. In addition, the Trump administration announced that they're going to be doing an investigation. These investigations are announced from time to time on different types of goods. I believe windmills were another one that was announced. But anyway, furniture is going to be investigated to see what they're going to do about that, whether they're going to levy additional tariffs on those goods coming into the country in an effort to boost U.S. manufacturing. Another huge piece of news, postal shipments. A lot of the global posts have suspended shipments to the U.S. because they're not prepared to collect duties for goods that are under de minimis. So again, reminder that we'll talk about this in a second, that under $800 de minimis is going away in 3 days, August 29th. A lot of the global posts just aren't ready for that because they can't collect. The funds. Also, transshipment. So there's been some news around transshipment. That means goods that are routed through a third country. So let's say it's made in China, routed through Vietnam, but it's called a Vietnamese shipment. Can't do that. So the administration is saying, no, those goods are going to get an extra tariff. So they're going to be 40% penalty for moving goods through another countries. And there's different HS codes that are going to apply to that, different goods that they're going to detail that we can't cover here, but that information is available. All right, Patrick, let's talk about where all the different countries stand with their trade agreements.
Yeah, so here we are. Here's the map of the world. So quite a few trade agreements have been signed and agreed. So a lot of them got details to be ironed out, but the frameworks are in place. Canada, Craig's just mentioned, 35% Canadian goods not covered by USMCA. Mexico, 30%. That IEEPA tariff lingers and it's paused. That's at about 60 days now. So another 2 months to go on that until it kicks in. The EU came away with a good deal, 15% across majority of sectors. That 50%, of course, steel and aluminium will remain as it does for everywhere. Switzerland, a bit of a rough time for Switzerland. Their deal, the Rose Garden number was 31%. That was proposed, remember, back in April. It actually went up 8 points to 39%. So there was recent news about chocolate makers reevaluating where they manufacture and where they import and how they import into the US. Big market for them, of course. So we'll have to see how that shakes out for chocolate makers, Swiss chocolate makers. Brazil stubbornly stuck at 50% on Brazilian imports, even more on beef, which is an enormous export from Brazil to the US. So I would say work to be done by the Brazilian administration with the US administration on improving that. India, as we move across, India, the 26%, that was, it's been a decrease from the threatened 50%. So India seems to be securing a better position now from what it was just a few weeks ago. China, remember, that's on hold until November the 10th. That gets us through the holiday peak over the coming weeks. So everything will be in country at that temporary rate of 30% by November. After November, we have to wait and see. There's a lot of time between now and then. Vietnam, 20% on most exports from Vietnam. But remember, Craig mentioned they were targeted specifically 40% for the transshipment. If it's not made in Vietnam and it's made elsewhere, we are going to slap 40% on it in the US. So transshipping is a no-go. The US, as a reciprocal, is that US get duty-free access into the Vietnamese market, which they've long wanted. Japan, reasonable deal, 15%, except, of course, steel and aluminium. Taiwan, that was the proposed was 32. It's been decreased to 20%, a bit of a win for Taiwan. And then Indonesia, finally 19% on Indonesian exports, which is good news. Almost 100% for you. Going the other way will be duty-free. So a big market, Indonesia's big market, and has been targeted for the US for some time. So what's missing off here is South Korea. There was the leader from South Korea was in Washington. You may have noticed yesterday. Details of that trade deal have yet to emerge. So we will see, but maybe the next time we meet and we show this map, we might have another one. That might be South Korea. So let's see what happens in due course.
Also, the UK, I noticed, Patrick, the UK is not on here, and I think they got probably the best deal out of everybody.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that we should add that one, actually. The UK was the very first deal, if you remember, signed in Canada quite a few weeks ago now, but they got the 10%, okay, except steel and aluminium, of course, that's 50 like everybody else. So the UK got a very reasonable deal, first out of the gates, and got a good deal. So yeah, so we should acknowledge that on the map. So this is our adapted rose garden slide, where we have in the dark orange, we have, obviously we've got the countries listed in the columns, and then the dark orange is what was proposed back in April, and then the subsequent columns show where we've landed. So the dark blue are unfavorable changes for those countries, meaning that it went up. So Brazil is the top one there. You see that the proposed reciprocal was 10%, very modest, arguably, but they've ended up for 50% and even more for products like beef. So so the dark blues are where they've gone unfavorably for the origin country. The light blue, on the other hand, have gone favorable. So it's been reduced. The tariff has been reduced. There's more favorables than unfavorables. And this is, I suppose, testament to the trade talks and the deals that have happened over the last few months. So interesting to see how things have changed, and of course, how things will continue to change. South Korea there, you see, we still don't know the outcome, but that ended up being 15%, which was lower. Let's see if it's improved after the talks yesterday. We'll wait and see. So Craig, where are we now?
Yeah, oops, I clicked at the same time. Yeah, so China, just a reminder where we are on China. China is 30%, so that's the 20% IEEPA tariffs plus the 10% baseline. But don't forget, there's still Section 301 tariffs in place, and that applies to a vast majority, well, a very large swath of Chinese goods. So there's still a base tariff for China, and then you're adding the 30% onto that. Effectively, once you add it all up, it's an average of about 55%. And again, de minimis ended for China and Hong Kong on May 2nd. So that's been in place for a while. And there's still exemptions for 301. There are some products that are exempt for 301. We don't have time to go into them, but there are some exemptions there. But in general, China is, baseline tariff plus the 30%. So it's, it can go up as high as 100%. We talked a bit about Canada and Mexico, so I'm not going to go into too much detail there, other than I noticed Jenna asked a question. How can we figure out if our products are no longer having the retaliatory tariff after 9/1? Furniture is their area. Well, the answer is the HS code. So, there's very specific codes, tariff codes that are articulated against those different products, and it depends on whether it is been removed from that list or if it's still on the list. And we'll talk a bit about tariff codes in a second. So For any other major trading partners that are not in the list or don't have trade agreements, it's still at 10%. Patrick talked about the UK at 10%, 25% on steel and aluminum. Everyone else is at 50%. We talked about some of the rest of the country, so I won't go into a lot of detail there. The only other thing I'll mention is that there is still, the other big kind of tariff block is the 232s with Section 232s, which is steel, aluminum, copper, autos are all are at 50%, steel and aluminum, 25% on autos. And then we're waiting to see what's going to happen with imported semiconductors. That was threatened at 100%. So fret not, we have a link. You'll get this presentation after. That link will be clickable down at the bottom there so you can see where things are by country. We obviously don't have time to cover everything here. But the big piece of news is in 3 days, August 29th, duty-free de minimis is going to end for all countries. So what does that mean? That means that for anything under $800, duties are going to be payable, where previously they were not. This is causing a lot of, I would say, cavitation in the supply chain world, where we mentioned posts and carriers are not used to having to collect duties and taxes for goods under $800. They now do. So everyone's scrambling to get ready for this. And as I mentioned before, a lot of the global posts have announced, I think there's only one that has said it's going to continue shipping to the US. Was that the Royal Mail, Patrick? I think it might have been. Yeah, that said that they would continue, but everyone else has said, they're gonna suspend things. So, the question is, are you really ready for it? What does it all mean, Patrick?
Yeah. So, if you remember, Craig, months ago, when we were going through this, we were talking, on one hand, we were talking about the changing tariffs, and we had all those fluctuations and the turbulence. On the other hand, we had the threat of de minimis going away. And we said at the time that the de minimis going away is as big, if not bigger news and impact than changing tariffs. Sure, tariffs change 5, 10, 20%. It happens, and it happens actually quite often. There was just a lot of noise around it. But the de minimis is a huge change. It's an enormous change. So up until, as Craig mentioned, up until this Friday, so today, tomorrow, and the day after, anything over under $800 will enter the US duty-free, unless it's from China, of course. That was reduced down to 0 some time ago. But after the 29th, this Friday, midnight, anything under $800 will no longer be duty-free. Therefore, tariffs will be imposed on those goods. So you have two choices of clearance, because Section 321, that clearance, Type 86, all those duty-free clearances, they all go away. Now you have Type 1, which is the formal clearance, anything over $2,500, and Type 11, which is the informal clearance, which is below that $2,500. So these are two more sophisticated methods of clearance, which are used into the US. Gone is Type 86, the duty-free clearance. That's gone. So you're going to have to choose one of these two. Therefore, you're going to need more information on your entry. And that includes a full 10-digit HS code. It includes country of origin. It includes declared value. We'll talk a little bit about the 4 horsemen a little later on. But all those data elements are required to get a clearance into the United States, which is why postal agencies are having a problem. If you think about it, and you go to overseas, you go to a post office to send a shipment to the US, the value is $500 US. Of course, that's below the de minimis. There's consignee information, of course, sender information. All that information has to be provided, but there's no entry form. There's no entry form when you send that shipment. So post offices are not set up for this. Anything under $800, no problems. Postal went straight over, but they're not set up to calculate duties and taxes, collect it. They don't have stations here in the US where they can facilitate payment and collect payment and then pay CBP. Hence why we're seeing this suspension around the world of postal agencies. The good news is that there are carriers, many carriers, the big three, DHL, FedEx, UPS, as well as many local carriers and regional carriers who will be able to provide service. So this is not a standstill of global trade, not at all. It just means switching to other carriers. So there'll be a lot of companies, I'm sure people on this call, who are scrambling around to find carriers who can take their shipments, perform the clearances, and then do the final mile delivery into the US outside of the postal agencies, which they may have been using. But there is the additional information required, and we can't stress it enough. HS codes are going to be required, declared value is going to be required, country of origin is going to be required. When you switch to these, I mean, you just have to look at an airway bill, a DHL or FedEx or UPS airway bill, you'll see all the data fields, additional data fields that are going to be required. So, yes, choose your carriers carefully, but do also consider in the same moment, also consider the extra data that you're going to need to provide those carriers to be able to facilitate clearance into the US from the 29th of August, this Friday onwards.
Yeah, okay. That's right. And, you know, I think a lot of you probably are dealing with USMCA. So, and we've had a lot of questions about, okay, how do I qualify? And it's really interesting. Only about 40% of the goods that qualified for USMCA previously actually went ahead and certified for USMCA. The reason is because the tariffs for that other 60% weren't that high anyway, so there wasn't really a reason to. So that's all changed, and as we mentioned before, around 90% are now coming in through USMCA. So everyone's scrambling to qualify for USMCA and certify their goods. So how do you certify, is a question we often get. You can actually self-certify. So this is something you can do yourself. And all you have to do really is verify your eligibility. There's 9 sort of data elements that go into your eligibility. But in general, what it means is that the vast majority of the value of the good or the transposition of different inputs into a finished good is Canadian or Mexican content. That's really what that means. So that's how you get that certification. And as I said, you can do that yourself. You have to be aware that there are some exemptions and some special rules, but really your requirement is just to maintain a record of why you believe you qualify for MCA. If you're asked for that information by customs, then you can provide that information. You can provide that information to your broker. So NAFTA, the previous trade agreement, you actually had to go and get a certification for the government. The big change with USMCA is you can actually self-certify, but you have to be able to prove, if you're asked, that you followed the rules and that your information is correct. So that's really how you qualify for USMCA. And again, everyone is really scrambling to do that because obviously it's a pretty big difference between 0 and 35% tariffs, or 25% if you're in Mexico. Okay, so let's go on to, Patrick mentioned the 4 horsemen. We do this slide every time, and the reason is because it is so important. So there are 4 key data elements that really drive what happens at the border. The first is de minimis. We talked about de minimis for the US going from 800 to 0. Keep in mind, though, that there is a de minimis level for every country in the world. So if you're shipping to other countries, they have their own version of de minimis. And you need to know what the de minimis levels are because that's when duties and taxes start being applied. And in some countries where there's value-added taxes, like Canada, duties and taxes can be different. The de minimis levels can be different. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different. But that is what governs when duties start becoming payable. Country of origin is the other very important issue. Obviously, that's become, one of the most important issues. Where was the good made? Folks often make this mistake. They mistake it as country of shipment. So they think because it's shipped from a certain country, let's say it was made in China, shipped from the UK, that is not a UK country of origin. That is still a Chinese country of origin because the good was made or manufactured in China. So make sure you know the country of origin of your goods. Very, very important that you submit that information correctly. And the third piece, probably the most important piece, or what we call the Rosetta Stone of global trade, is tariff code classification. Up to 6 digits. This is like a numeric code that describes every type of good. Every country has like 20,000 of these different codes. For most countries, they're common up to 6 digits, but every country in the world appends another 3 to 6, usually 4. So it's usually a 10-digit code that describes the type of good. And if you think about an Excel spreadsheet, the tariff code classification, the numeric code is the row, the country of origin of the good is the column. The intersection of those two is the duty rate that's payable. That's why it's so important to have those two pieces of information correct. And then the declared value of the good is what the duty rate will apply to. And I actually see a question from Brandon where we're hearing from suppliers section 232 should only be applied to material cost, not value. Can you confirm which one is correct? Yeah, typically it would be material cost and not value, but there are rules governing that too on what you can declare as value. So and every situation is unique. So you can talk to a licensed customs broker, CBP customs broker, on their interpretation of that. So that's also important. But declared value of the good is one of the more important pieces too. So those are the 4 horsemen. Keep those in mind. Make sure your information is correct. I sound like a broken record, but it's right now in this environment, it is super critical to have the correct information. You cannot ship across borders with incorrect information because governments are looking for it, and you can get in a lot of trouble. So, what's happening with the auto industry, Patrick?
Okay, yeah. So auto industry, one of the biggest industries over here in the US, is taking a big hit. So reportedly, taking a hit of $12 billion this year because of the uncertainty and the rising tariffs. So the biggest hit is Toyota, who have recently announced that their operating profits to be reduced by $3 billion. Enormous, as you can imagine. That's a hit. That's a huge hit on any P&L, and will result in them reevaluating their supply chain. And you look down this list here, obviously Toyota's the standout, Volkswagen also very high, the German manufacturer also very high up. But then you see GM and you see Ford, and right at the bottom there you see Tesla. So US car manufacturers are not immune to this. Why? Because their supply chains are global. They are dependent upon so many different components and widgets which come in from different countries, manufactured in different countries, and brought into the US for final assembly on the production line. So they can make up an enormous percentage of the car, particularly the value of the car. If it's technology, the circuitry and the panels and so on and so forth that go into a vehicle, the high-tech equipment that goes into a vehicle, they can be of high value and therefore will attract tariffs when they're coming in from these other countries. So auto industry is one to watch. How that $12 billion hit will impact people in the US remains to be seen. We'll have to see how it unfolds. But yeah, auto industry, amongst others, the auto industry is taking a big hit. And if we move on to onto other news items that we've picked up over the last week, Japan's exports have experienced their largest decline in 4 years, which has been attributed directly to the impact of the tariffs. So it fell 2.6% in value, which is enormous. That was last July this year versus July the year before, which, as you can imagine, has enormous impacts. Japan is a huge exporter to the US and the world, but the US is its largest market, and it's experiencing a decline. Estee Lauder, cosmetics brand, which we're all familiar with, they're seeing $100 million hit because of the tariffs, again, because their supply chains are global, their raw materials or finished goods that they bring into the country are made overseas and are attracting tariffs, and therefore they're taking actions, inventory cuts and promotional cuts to offset or mitigate this $100 million loss. So it goes the other way as well. Soybean farmers are experiencing difficult times at the moment. Their biggest market is China. Remember, China didn't lay down and accept these tariff changes. They retaliated, if you remember, and as a result, the soybean export from the US to China has declined by half, over half, 51%, in fact, which is really hitting soybean farmers here in the US. So just an example there that it goes both ways. It's not just goods coming in, it's also goods going out to these destination countries. And e-com giants, we mentioned Temu many webinars ago, one of our early webinars where we had screenshots of the Temu app, and we saw that they were pulling all of their international merchants and retailers and focusing only on US, which was a small number, but consequently, because they were so dependent upon international merchants importing into the US, they've seen a huge decline in the app download and the app usage and the number of active users. On the flip side, though, Amazon, notably, have reported a boost in US sales because their merchant mix is different. They've got more US-based merchants than the likes of Temu and Shein. So consequently, they're enjoying that benefit, and they're seeing that in the sales that they've reported recently. So who's covering the cost of tariffs? It's stacking up billions and billions of dollars. We reported the trade statistics just last week. So who is covering it? Well, 22% of tariffs have been absorbed by the US consumer up until June. That's what we've got data until. 67% of US consumers are sharing the tariff costs. That's the percentage share. And what we're seeing, a transition, and we're expecting to see that they hit up to 64% on US businesses, tariffs so far. And we're expecting US consumers to that 22% that you see on the left-hand side there to increase. So I think it was McKinsey, one of the
Goldman Sachs, actually.
That's right, yeah. Reported that could go much higher towards the end of the year as we hit holiday time. So at the moment, the consumer has weathered it, but we're expecting it's going to hit the pockets of US consumers as the year goes by. That's right, Goldman Sachs. I see it at the bottom there. We've got a link in our slide deck that we share. You'll be able to read the story yourself. But that we're expecting that US consumers to bear the brunt of the tariffs as the months go by and we hit holiday period. Moving on to steps, Craig.
Yeah, and it's not surprising that stat exists because, I think a lot of businesses have been absorbing the hits so far just through building inventory in the early days when the tariffs hadn't hit yet. That's running out, and that's why I think, and that's why Goldman Sachs is saying that the tariff is going to go from, the consumer absorbing 22% to the consumer absorbing, 2/3 of it. So, you really need to look at, and it's really, before, I would say that supply chain efficiency was kind of a buzzword. Now it's supply chain flexibility or resilience is really what companies that are leading the way are looking to do. So it's diversification of shipping carriers or sources of supply. And you see that with the end of de minimis where, the postal agencies are saying, we're not shipping anymore. Well, if you don't have other carrier relationships to move your goods, you're a bit stuck. So, having different carrier relationships and sources of supply is important. Automation is important. So we obviously offer a lot of automation tools, which we'll go into in a second, which we can help you out with. You can work with a customs broker, lean on their network and expertise to understand, what your specific obligations are. Although I will warn you that U.S. customs brokers in particular are just trying to keep their heads above water, given all the changes that are going on. I mentioned number 4, and I'm going to harp on it. Make sure your product details are compliant with global trade regulations. Make sure you know your de minimis, country of origin, your tariff codes, and your value for duty. You have to know those things. And then finally, maybe less of a strategy now is just building inventory, but maybe building inventory in different locations where you can flexibly source depending on what happens. Although I think things are starting to settle out now where we understand a little bit better what the environment is. So, so those are some steps you can take to build a resilient supply chain. And remember, supply chain efficiency was kind of the name of the game before, getting the costs out of the supply chain, but now it's flexibility. So the companies that have flexibility and have resilience are the ones that I think are going to win. So let's go into some poll questions. Firstly, are you going to adjust your supply chain because of these changes in any of the following ways? Are you going to diversify suppliers, manufacturers, switch to local, invest in new trade technologies such as ours? Are you rethinking your distribution strategies or other ideas that we haven't listed here you don't know yet? You can select multiple of these actually, so you can choose whichever apply to you. I'll give you another couple of seconds to answer that. And we've done this every week. I think we're on our 27th webinar now. And it's really interesting how things have changed. I don't know yet, was it like 90% for the first little while, but it's starting to settle out where folks are starting to make some decisions. So let's see what's happened here. Yeah, this is really interesting. So, diversification, 56%, switching to local, rethinking distribution strategies. I don't know yet, is dropping quite significantly from where it was. And that's not surprising because folks are starting to have to make decisions based on the current environment. You just can't stay in limbo forever. So that is where we're at. That's interesting. So thank you for that. Another question for you, kind of going back to the Goldman Sachs discussion we had earlier. How are you going to address the increased costs from global tariffs on your goods? Are you going to pass the costs on? Are you going to include a tariff surcharge? Are you going to absorb the costs? Are you going to share the cost with your suppliers? You can select multiple of these as well. So if you can please just let us know what you're doing. Absorbing the cost was number one for a long time, but that's shifted. And that sort of mirrors what Goldman Sachs was saying, where I think, folks were able to absorb the cost for a while, but, that sort of ran its course, and now the costs are starting to be passed on. So let's see what everyone said. Yeah, see, not surprising. So 80%, this is actually a little higher than what Goldman Sachs was saying, but, absorbing the cost is dropping. That's actually the exact same number that Goldman Sachs came up with, absorbing the cost of 22%.
Yeah.
So it's looking like this shift. So you folks who have been answering this poll are mirroring exactly what happened, because this was the inverse when we started this poll. It was 20% were passing on, 80% were absorbing. It's literally flipped. So that is very, very, very interesting. Thank you for that. So how can businesses keep up with these changes, Patrick?
Yeah. So in summary, it's and we say this every week, it's compliance, compliance, compliance. That's what should be top of mind as we go into this, what is now becoming, it's less turbulent. Deals are in place, dates are in place, changes have been confirmed. So it's all about now focusing on compliance, because what you don't want is penalties and fines and delays. Non-compliance means that you're either misclassifying, under-declaring, or providing inaccurate country of origin details on your shipments. And that, therefore, is breaking the law, which comes with penalties. It's the law. An executive order is the law. So CBP, publish regularly. You can lose your license. It's a criminal charge. There's fines, suspensions of business, this, that, and the other. So that must be avoided at all costs. You must be compliant with the HS code, the 4 horsemen. You've got to be compliant with those 4 horsemen that Craig went through earlier. You don't want to be, on the other hand, you don't want to be overpaying or underpaying customs duties. So you want to be paying to the penny exactly what you owe CBP, the US government. Of course, if you're underpaying, that means you've done something wrong with the 4 horsemen. You've either misclassified it or you've underdeclared it. We covered that just a moment ago. If you're overpaying, then you're eating, or your customer is going to have to, you're passing that on to your customer, and there's no need for that, right? You should be paying to the penny exactly what's owed to CBP. All of this, of course, adds costs and customer delays and dissatisfied customers in the supply chain. So if you're non-compliant, there's going to be delays, there's going to be hiccups, you're going to be paying too much. And you don't want that, because your customers, at the end of the day, customers are king, and they're going to have a very bad experience if you're non-compliant. So it's on the top of many people's minds. It should be on the top of everybody here on the call. It's certainly on the top of our minds and the customers that we speak to. So compliance, compliance, compliance. Okay.
Yeah, for sure. And just for I'm just going to click next. Pardon me. So how do you take action with Avalara? We have a number of tools. It's really, cuts across what I'll call classification. So tariff code classification in the middle there. I bring that up first because it's so important. So we can help you get your tariff codes. We're going to show you a demo in a second of one of our tools. We have others. So we have a multitude of different ways that you can get your tariff codes. So that is one of the primary things we do. We also offer calculators, so we can calculate duties and taxes for you. We can do that in checkout. We can do that offline. There's, again, a variety of different ways and that you can implement our calculation tools. And then finally, trade restrictions. So we can help you understand anything that may apply to your goods in terms of trade restrictions or rules governing certain goods that are going into 180 countries around the world. So we have a lot of we have the tools you need to maintain global compliance. So we'll give you a question in a second. If you want to talk to somebody about that, you can. In the meantime, we're going to do a demo of one of our tools. Remember, this is just one of our tools for tariff code classification. So if you could go ahead and roll that demo, please, Regina.
Welcome to the Avalara Tariff Content Classification Tool demo. Take a tour to see how Avalara can help your business's global trade compliance. First, choose the country of import. In our example, we will use the US. Click to proceed. Next, select the country of origin. In our example, we will use China. Click to proceed. Next, let's describe our product. Click to proceed. Now, we are ready to classify. Click to proceed. The tariff classification tool needs to know a few more details. Click to select the upper material. Select the lower material. Click to proceed. We've now reached an HS6. Click to drill down to reach the HS10. Since our product is a men's golf shoe, click to drill down. Since our product is not welt footwear, click to drill down. We have reached the HS8. Click to find the HS10. We have now reached our HS10. Click to see rate description. Here, we can see the total duty amount for this product. This totals 28.5% for the general rate, plus 10% for the preferential and additional duty rate, which totals 38.5%. This concludes the demo. Want to talk with an expert about your global trade compliance? Schedule time with a member of our cross-border team below for a live demo.
All right, so if you want a 14-day free trial of that tool, go ahead and let us know. We can give you access to it. You can play around with it for 14 days. And again, there's other versions of it. That's just one that happens to be, something we can visualize. So if you want to do that, please let us know. We'll give you a second to answer that. And then, Patrick, some questions. Do you want to tackle a couple of questions while we're just waiting for folks to...
Yeah, sure. A question from Julia regarding the India tariff rate. So that was paused at 25% on the 7th of August. However, that pause expires tomorrow on the 27th of August. And Julia, it goes to 50%. So there was a pause, you're quite right, but that expires midnight tonight. So it's up to 50% unless there's a 11th hour deal. John?
Yeah, just really quickly, Patrick, if you do want to follow up from an Avalara sales representative on any of our other tools that we can help you out with, just go ahead and click yes right there. Please continue, Patrick, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, whilst people are clicking yes. John, you asked a question about a specific HS code. I don't have that one off the top of my head. Country of origin, Poland, but you did mention that some of the components were different metals in a boiler. So we spoke to customs brokers just recently about how they were tackling this. So a finished good, such as a boiler, is full of different metals and materials and components, this, that, and the other. Apparently, on the customs entry now, there are 2 line items, one which addresses steel and aluminium, okay, 50%, remember, and then another line which is the non-steel and aluminium of that particular product, which you then address at the duty rate from that particular, in this case, the EU, Poland, for those particular components or the items that are not steel and aluminium. So therefore, your boiler now comes with 2 lines, okay, 2 entry lines. So that is how that is tackled. Great.
Yeah. That final question, I guess, or actually maybe not a question, but an interesting comment from Jonathan. Curious to know what % of our audience think their businesses might not survive the elimination of de minimis. So a recent article from the Financial Post, that's a paper here in Canada, stated that as much as 40% of Canadian SMEs that export to the US will be out of business in 6 months. Wow. I certainly hope that's not the case, but yeah, the elimination of de minimis is a really, really, really big deal, and we're going to see the effects of it. So we'll continue to report on that here. And on that note, when is our next webinar, Regina?
Caught me off guard. Let's see, our next webinar is, thank you for advancing that slide, is the 9th.
Okay, great. So we'll see everyone on the 9th. A reminder that we're going to every 2 weeks following that, so the 23rd, the 9th. What I will say is if there is anything that's sort of really groundbreaking or happens that makes it important for us to get on before that, we will do so. We'll let you know. Also, you'll get a copy of this presentation after the fact. So the resources and links that are kind of peppered throughout the presentation, you'll be able to get access to those. So until next time, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
All right, thank you so much to our speakers today. And in the next 24 hours, you will get a post-event email, and from that email, you'll have a link to register for additional webinars, and then also a link back to the deck for today, the on-demand recording, and all of the resources. So we hope you'll join us in 2 weeks, well, the 9th, and as we take off on our bi-weekly format. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.